The strange, expanding mall was eerily quiet as the six of us walked down the mezzanine, carrying an injured and nearly catatonic Abbey. Not for the first time, I asked myself, why the hell had we come here? I was the faculty advisor for the school's paranormal research club, affectionately dubbed the Rocky Horrors, I reminded myself. We'd come here on a lark, goaded into the field trip by Carter, a student who documented for himself the shifting realities of the Center Mall before convincing us to join him here on a research expedition. Looking back, the whole thing seemed so impossibly bizarre. We'd come here to record some measurements, check out the place, and leave again. But after investigating a Claire store which had popped up overnight, we emerged to find ourselves in a different place. Still the mall, but now it was quiet, dark, and empty. Oh, and there were also hideous, oversized millipede monsters who fell from the ceiling and attacked one of my students. Did I mention that part? They had mauled Abbey, and now I was forced to carry her as we searched desperately for the exit. After another half hour of walking, I took the club up on their offer to help with Abbey. The Rocky Horrors took turns carrying her while we backtracked looking for the escalators. We never found them. A half hour fell into an hour, then dragged to 2. Before long, I'd lost count of the time entirely, since the scenery around us never changed. Row after row of shuttered shops on either side of a barren promenade. The floor was gray, the walls were gray, and what little sunlight slipped in through the dirty skylights was just as gray. Abby's decline was slow but unmistakable. The pain in her stomach increased over the course of those first 2 hours, to the point where she whimpered with every jarring step her carrier took. That was hard enough, but it became worse when she grew quiet. We stopped periodically, trying to coax Abbey to drink from the bottle of water Veronica had brought into the mall, but Abbey struggled to swallow. "Why haven't we passed the escalators, Mr. Monroe?" Carter asked me quietly, away from the rest of the group during one of our stops. "Do you think we took a wrong turn?" "We haven't made any turns, Carter." "Then why haven't we seen the escalators?" "I don't know. I'm sorry, I just don't know." I was beginning to worry that we would continue on forever, moving through a world as static and bleak as a smudged photograph. But then, we came upon the first door without a metal shutter. It stood out from its neighbors like a missing tooth. There were still no signs or other indicators of what kind of store it was, but at least something was different. The entry into the store stood open but utterly dark. "I don't like it," Veronica mumbled, staring into the shadows. "I mean, at least it's different," Tyler said, though, like the rest of us, he kept his distance from the entrance. Jessie tried shining her phone's flashlight at the shadows, but the light failed to penetrate. "Should we just keep walking?" "We only have 1 bottle of water," Carter said, "and no food. There could be useful stuff inside the store." "There could be anything inside of the store," Tyler pointed out. The Rocky Horrors all turned to look at me. I shifted my grip on Abbey, who, thankfully, seemed to be asleep, and stared into the shadows looking for anything. The outline of shelves, a blinking smoke alarm, movement, but there was nothing. The darkness was like a solid wall, something you'd see a cartoon coyote paint onto a cliff just before a train came screaming out. Abbey was groaning softly in her sleep. Part of me wanted to walk into the shadows to explore the store to see if there was anything in there that could help her. Not to mention it would at least break up the repetition of the last few hours. But a larger part of me recoiled from the idea. The blackness reminded my lizard brain of cave openings and pits, and dark, endless caverns. "Let's keep moving," I said. Before I could readjust Abbey, the sound of sobbing drifted out of the store. "What the fuck is that?" Tyler asked, taking a step back. "Help," a small, unseen voice whispered. Please help me." No one moved or spoke. No one even seemed to breathe other than the irregular gulps that Abbey inhaled. "Everyone else heard that too, right?" Carter asked after a moment. "Nope," Tyler replied, staring into the darkness. "They sounded scared," Jesse said. "They sounded familiar," Veronica added. Everyone turned to look at her. "My sister," she said when she noticed. "My little sister. That sounds like... No, that is her voice." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Positive. Only... she died when we were both young. She got sick. It can't be her voice." Veronica was trembling. "So why am I so sure it's... Is someone there?" the voice whispered, interrupting. "Please, it's really dark. I'm scared. I think something's wrong. I can't see anything. Is anyone there?" "Bridget?" Veronica asked, taking a step toward the voice. "Is that you? Veronica? What's happening? Where's Mom and Dad? Why is it so dark? Please, I'm really scared. Can you come get me?" Veronica took another step forward, but stopped when Tyler moved to block her. "Something's not right," he said, shifting so that he was still in front of Veronica, but not with his back to the shadows. "I don't think that's your sister." "It's her voice. I know it is. How can you explain that if it's not her?" Tyler shrugged helplessly. "How can you explain it even if it is her? How would she be stuck in the mall with us if she's... dead?" Veronica snapped. "I'm sorry, but yeah." I handed Abbey to Carter and joined them. "He's right, Veronica," I said gently. "None of this makes sense." A high-pitched scream ripped through the air. "Help me!" the voice from inside the store wailed. "They're hurting me, Veronica! They're hurting me! They're hurting me!" "Wait!" I shouted, but Veronica had already slipped under Tyler's arm and was heading for the entrance. "Bridget, come toward my voice," Veronica called out, activating her phone's flashlight and stepping into the store. She stopped moving suddenly, with one foot in the darkness, a confused look on her face. "What?" she said, trying to pull back but appearing stuck. Tyler and I reached her by then, with Jesse only a step behind us. I noticed that Veronica's left leg up to the knee was hidden by the shadows in the store, even when Jesse shined a light at it directly. "I'm stuck," Veronica told me, tugging at her leg. "It's cold. It's so cold." I took her hand, the one without the phone, and tried to pull her back. There was resistance, like her leg was stuck in concrete. "Give me a hand," I said to Tyler and Jesse. The three of us grabbed hold of Veronica by her arms and jacket and heaved, but she didn't budge. She was leaning away from the store, trying to throw her weight away from her trapped leg, but she ended up losing her balance and her other foot slipped into the shadows. "Oh God," Veronica said, sounding on the edge of panic. "Why is it so cold?" The shadows were covering both of her legs, nearly up to her waist by then. There was a slickness to the darkness, like oil or mud, a stain that acted like a spider web. Veronica began to hyperventilate, scrambling to pull herself out of the store. She twisted as much as her trapped legs would allow, clutching onto my arm. "Please, Mr. Monroe, please." Something laughed in the darkness. At first, it was soft and childlike, but it grew deeper and less human the longer it went on, until it was a distorted cackle. A sudden jerk dragged Veronica past her waist into the shadows. Her eyes went wide and she screamed as she was drawn into the store, her body nearly horizontal, lifted up by an unseen force. "Please, no," she screamed, grabbing for us. "Please, please, 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 please." Tyler and I each held onto one of her hands, while Jessie desperately swept her phone's light around her friend, searching for whatever was dragging the terrified girl away. Veronica shrieked. "It bit me. It..." The rest of her sentence disappeared along with her as she was ripped away into the blackness. Tyler and I were leaning so far back when it happened that we both lost our balance and fell, wiping out Jessie as we collapsed. The fall stunned me for a second, but Veronica's raw scream of agony helped me scramble to my feet. "Veronica!" I shouted into the darkness. As if in answer, the store's metal shutter slammed down. Veronica screamed again. "No," I said, trying to lift up the shutter. "Veronica, hold on. We're coming." But the heavy curtain wouldn't move. I shook the metal, then put my shoulder to it, and then kicked it. When I might as well have been kicking a mountain. The entire time I was trying to break through, Veronica kept screaming. Just under the screams, filling the silence when one faded before the next began, that horrible laughter. I'm not sure how long I attacked the shutter, but eventually the screams and the laughter both ceased. Sometime later, a small hand on my arm made me turn to look at Jessie. "Mr. Monroe?" she asked. "What do we do?" I didn't know how to answer. There was no sign of Veronica and no clear way to get into the store. Even if we could open the shutter, I thought of that strange, hungry darkness and realized that there might be no way for us to help. But she was my student, a Rocky Horror, and the thought of her leaving made me sick. Still, I had 4 other kids to take care of, and Abbey, asleep on a nearby bench now, looked like she was getting worse. "We keep going," I told Jessie. "We get out of here, and then we come back with the police, the fire department, the goddamn army. We come back with everyone and we find Veronica." Jessie nodded, but I could see how shaken she was feeling. Carter was kneeling over Abbey, brushing sweat from her forehead and trying to coax her to take a sip of water. Tyler was standing off to the side, his 1,000-yard stare glued to the store where Veronica had vanished. Though I did notice him glance up and around the walls every few minutes, as if from reflex. It took a few minutes to get everyone focused and moving, but eventually we left the area. I listened for any sign of Veronica for a long time. There was nothing. Only the echo of quiet laughter as we turned a corner. The path ahead was exactly like the path behind us. Cold, gray, barren, lifeless. The only difference was, now, 1 out of every 20 or so storefronts stood open, their security gates rolled up, and their entrances pitch black curtains of shadow. If we walked too close to any of those pits, we could hear voices. Sometimes they sounded like Veronica sobbing. Sometimes they sounded like her screaming. But most of the time, it was laughter or formless whispers inviting us to step inside the stores. We kept to the middle of the walkway and did our best to ignore the sounds. Time and distance lost all meaning. We might have walked for an hour, or 12 hours, or a day. Abbey slept through most of it, though her occasional whimpering and twitching eyelids made me fear it wasn't a peaceful sleep. At one point, while our group was resting, Abbey suddenly sprang awake. "Water," she begged. "I'm so thirsty. Water, please." Jessie pulled out the half-full water bottle and gently brought it up to Abby's lips. Abbey grabbed the bottle and drained it in 3 hard gulps. While I would rather have rationed the water, I was at least glad to see that Abbey was showing signs of life. My optimism was short-lived. As soon as Abbey finished the water, she threw it back up violently, and then she kept vomiting again and again, each episode punctuated by deep, racking coughs that made her entire body shake. "Oh, Jesus," Tyler whispered. Jessie and Carter were doing their best to comfort Abbey and to keep her from falling into the growing puddle of sickness around her. Tyler was staring at that puddle, his face so drained of blood that I was worried he was about to become ill too. Then I saw the movement in the vomit, and I understood. Millipedes. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. They were all tiny, none larger than a paperclip, and most were smaller than that. But God, there were so many of them. The bugs squirmed in the puddle, and every sputter from Abbey threw more on the ground. Jessie and Carter had both noticed, but to their credit, did not back away from their friend. With one final, wet cough, Abbey stopped vomiting and knelt for a moment, breathing heavily. She looked at me, her eyes bloodshot and filled with tears. "I'm so scared. Something's wrong." "It's okay," I told her, kneeling next to her, careful to avoid the wriggling fluids. "We're gonna get you home. You'll be safe. You'll be okay." Her eyes were drifting, unfocused. If something happens, tell my mom. Please, tell my mom." Abby's eyes went wide before she could finish. She screamed and fell back, clutching at her face. I heard her head crack against the cold tile of the mall's floor. For a terrible moment, I thought that she might be dead. But Abbey groaned, unconscious but in obvious agony. Carter was the closest to her and tried to lift her up. He froze before he reached her. I think he tried to scream, but the only thing that came out was a wet croak. A millipede, twice the size of any of the others, was crawling out of the corner of Abby's eye. "Fuck," Jessie said. "Fucking fuck." I wasn't sure if the creature was damaging Abby's eye. It seemed like it was coming from around the eye, near the tear duct. After pulling an inch of its body free, the millipede began to hiss, its crowd of legs quivering. I realized it was about to bite Abbey, probably down directly at her partially closed eye. I closed the 2 steps between us in just the time it took to tug my sweater sleeve over my hand. I grabbed the top half of the millipede through the sleeve. It writhed and hissed and bit my cuff. Its jaws went through the material like it was tissue paper, but it missed my fingers, striking too high, at the very top of the sleeve. The bug, seeming to realize that it wasn't getting flesh, adjusted to bite lower, but by that time I was already spiking it onto the floor. There was a loud snap as its shell cracked from the impact, followed by a softer crunch as I ground it into a wet stain under my boot heel. Then I stomped down, over and over. I think I yelled. When I finally stopped, Tyler and Carter were staring at me. Jessie was crouched over Abbey. "Mr. Monroe?" Jessie called out. "Her eye." Abby's right eye was already swelling shut. A thin trail of blood ran down her cheek like a line of tears. She was out cold, no longer groaning. Carefully, slowly, I probed the area around the socket, then gently opened her eyelids. I let out a sigh of relief when I saw that her eye was bloodshot, but otherwise appeared whole. "Will there be more?" Carter asked. I started to shake my head, but the gesture fell into a shrug. "I don't know, Carter. I hope not. Let's keep going. There has to be something." There was a change in the mall as we walked. More and more storefronts had their shutters up, until it seemed like every other store was a dark cavity in the wall. The screaming, giggling, begging, and whispering coming from the shadows became a torrent, like some nightmare soundtrack that grew louder and louder until we had to stuff scraps of torn clothing into our ears. I'm not sure exactly when it stopped or why, but eventually we were walking in silence with every store around us open. They still called to us, invited us, but they didn't use words. Only a nihilistic gravity that occasionally caused one of us to begin to drift away from the middle of the promenade. "Might as well get this over with," the darkness seemed to say. I might have gone mad if we continued on like that, but not long after the store stopped whispering, we came upon the center's fountain. Only, instead of a wishing well roughly the size of a small swimming pool, the fountain's waters now stretched from a tile shore to beyond the horizon. It felt like standing on a beach and looking out over the ocean. Small waves lapped at the tiles. Instead of bringing in driftwood and shells, this artificial tide scattered pennies along the shoreline. Tyler bent down to scoop up some of the wet change from the shallows, but Jessie grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said. "Don't touch the water." "Damn," Carter said. He was carrying Abbey and shifted his grip while he looked out over the indoor ocean. "I'm so thirsty, but that water doesn't smell like anything I want to drink." I noticed the odor too. Metallic, coppery, maybe a hint of rotten eggs. My throat was dry and raw, but I figured I'd rather die of thirst than drink the fountain water. Though, once I was actually dying of thirst, I realized I might not be able to resist. As strange and ominous as the false sea was, it was at least a change from the endless rows and corridors of gray storefronts. The novelty of it inspired some flicker of hope that the center mall might still have an exit we could find. I tried not to think about Veronica. The guilt of leaving her was almost paralyzing, but I couldn't think of any way I could help her without outside intervention. Blowtorches or thermite would get through the security shutter. After that, there would still be those shadows to deal with. But maybe the military? A sudden, horrible realization dawned on me while I was daydreaming about Veronica's rescue. Even if we were able to break into the store where she disappeared, I had no idea which store would be among the hundreds or thousands of identical spots we'd passed. I cursed out loud, hating myself for not thinking to mark the damn thing before we'd left. Staring out over the gray water, the hopelessness of our situation finally caught up to me. What had I gotten these kids into? What if we never got out? They were my responsibility, and I brought them into this hell for what? A silly experiment? A fucking field trip? A sob got out of me then. The only one I'd allowed since we walked out of the Claires and into a waking nightmare. Mr. Monroe? I turned around. Jessie stood behind me, hands in her pockets and shoulders hunched against the eerie, persistent chill. "Are you okay?" she asked. The genuine concern in her voice almost finished the job of breaking me. The kids should have hated me for failing them, for leading them into such a miserable, vicious place. But I saw by the look on Jessie's face, and on Tyler's and Carter's, that they didn't hate me. They didn't blame me. They were worried about me, and they needed me. I bit down on the next sob before it could leak between my teeth. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just, didn't expect to go to the beach today." I looked down at my sweater with its gnawed sleeve. I feel overdressed. None of them laughed, but there were a few flickering grins. It was the best I could hope for at that moment. More than I could have hoped for. More than enough to keep going. We made Abbey as comfortable as we could. There were two of the stiff, narrow benches not far from the fountain, and we turned the area into a kind of camp. Abbey slept on one of the benches, while Carter, who protested but looked the most exhausted of all of us, fell asleep on the other. Jessie, Tyler, and I made do with the tiled floor between the benches. Not long after we'd settled in, Abbey woke up. "Please," she croaked. "Water. Thirsty. Water. Please." "We don't have any water," Jessie said softly, holding her friend's hand. "Water," Abbey repeated, pointing at the ocean 20 yards from where we were camping. Jessie shook her head. "It's not good water. It doesn't look right. It doesn't smell right." "Water," Abbey begged. "Water. Please. Thirsty. So thirsty. So thirsty." I was saved from the decision on whether to risk the water when Abbey quickly fell back asleep. Sooner rather than later, I knew we'd all need to drink. If we couldn't find a water source other than the strange fountain, which did not seem likely, we'd need to take our chances with what we had. My eyes were heavy, and I decided that unpleasant decision could at least wait until morning. I smiled brittly when I remembered that morning had no real meaning inside of the mall. For all I knew, it was morning. The weak, gray light never changed. Judging by my thirst, I guessed we'd been trapped for 12 hours or so, but I couldn't be sure. I slept fitfully for a little while. Bad dreams chased me back awake. Dreams full of shifting shadows in gray rooms. There was a silhouette in the middle of the room. In the nightmare, I walked closer until I saw that the shadow was a mannequin. It had its hands covering its face like it was weeping silently. Even without seeing her features, the mannequin was familiar to me. "I'm sorry," I said, startling myself at the sound of my own voice. I realized I was awake and still at the fountain's shore. The mannequin was nowhere to be seen. "Shh," Tyler whispered, holding a finger to his lips. My body flooded with a jolt of adrenaline, and my eyes darted around for danger. It took me a moment to realize that Jessie was sleeping with her head in Tyler's lap, and his gentle shushing was only because he didn't want me to wake her up. I relaxed and nodded, sitting up to lean against the bench where Carter was snoring softly. Abbey was curled up on the bench across from me, her breathing harsh but regular enough that I knew she was sleeping. Tyler and I sat in the dim quiet for a while, both of us sitting up and neither of us wanting to disturb the others. The only sound was the steady, soft lapping of the tide meeting tile. There was a barely audible chiming after each little wave, more loose change washing up on the shore. Jessie shifted in her sleep, and Tyler took the opportunity to lay her head down on his folded jacket. He stood up and stretched, then gestured toward the fountain. I followed him down to the water. "Can't sleep?" I asked quietly. "I did for a little while. I had some bad dreams." "Me too." Tyler watched the gray water as it dissolved into the distant horizon. "Mr. Monroe, I wanted to say I'm sorry." "Sorry for what, Tyler?" He turned to face me. "I was scared. I froze. Twice. When that thing fell on Abbey, and again when..." Tyler trailed off with a shiver and pointed at his eye. "I wasn't much use with Veronica either," he continued. "I'm sorry. I'm just so fucking scared." I saw he was close to tears. He was taller than me, but looked so small then. I had to remind myself that, for as much as I'd been relying on him and Jessie and Carter, they were all just kids. "Tyler, there's nothing for you to be sorry for." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You're reacting the way any normal person would." "No, that's not true. You're doing better. You're doing more. You helped me when I needed you with Abbey. You've done your part to carry her. Hesitating when the world goes crazy doesn't make you any kind of coward, Tyler, if that's what you're worried about. It just makes you human." He looked at me for a long moment, reading my face in the gray light. "You haven't hesitated." "Sure I have." Tyler shook his head. "Not really. You're always the first one moving when shit hits the fan. I want to be like that. I'm trying to be like that." I sighed. "I'm not braver than you, Tyler. Hell, when I was your age, if something like..." I gestured around at the dim, endless, empty mall. "This happened to me, I'd have been a gibbering pile of goo. But it's my fault you're all in this mess. I brought you here. Everything that happens to any of you kids, that's on me. My responsibility. My fault. So don't for a second think anything I'm doing is coming from a place of courage. It's fear, Tyler. Fear that I've brought my students who trusted me, who..." I suddenly realized that I was choking up, my eyes pricked with tears. The stress and horror and madness of our situation struck me like a burning bus. I let out a shaky breath and found I couldn't draw another one. I tried again and still couldn't breathe. Panic began to edge in. Then, Tyler hugged me. "It's not your fault," he said. "It's nobody's fault. Who could have seen this coming?" I sobbed silently, just a few times, then pulled back and nodded. "No wonder malls are dying," Tyler said. We both smiled, and then I remembered Veronica, and the smile fell. "I promise that I'm going to get you all out of here," I said, "and I'm going to come back for Veronica." "I know, Mr. Monroe," Tyler said, squeezing my arm. "And I'm coming back with you when you do. I'm coming back with the Green Berets and 0 fucking high school kids. I thought, but didn't say out loud. I was proud of Tyler. Of all of them. My rocky horrors. We stood together looking at the water in silence for a while. "Keith," I said. "What?" I turned to Tyler. "I think, given the circumstances, it's okay for you to use my first name." "Sure thing, Mr. Keith. I've actually got a brother named Keith." "Yeah, I remember him from a few years back. He was a nice guy." Tyler snorted. "Keith's a fun time, but a mega prick. He's the reason I'm weird about bugs." "I think anyone would be weird about the kind of bugs we've been seeing, Tyler." "Sure, but I don't even like the normal-sized ones. Keith tricked me under the crawl space under our house when I was a little kid. Told me we were playing cavers. Then he snuck out with the only flashlight and barricaded the tiny door. I was under there for almost 2 hours screaming before my mom got home from work and found me. A lot of things were crawling around under there in the dark with me. So now, I'm not so good with anything that has less than 2 or more than 4 legs." "Jesus," I muttered. His brother had always seemed harmless, if a bit of a prankster. Tyler shrugged. "He told me after, that's why they call it a crawl space. He sounds awful. He is not my favorite sibling, Mr. Monroe, that's for sure. Call me Keith. Never mind. Let's head back and try to get some sleep." I woke up to the sound of Jessie screaming. My first instinct was to look up. The mall ceiling was out of sight, lost in a gray haze, but I expected to see dark, many-legged shapes dropping down. There was nothing. I sat up and followed Jessie's horrified gaze. She was looking out at the water. When I saw what caused her to scream, I felt my stomach drop. Abbey was swimming away from shore. She was already 50 yards or more out, and widening the distance every second. Jessie's scream had woken Tyler and Carter as well. The 4 of us hurried down to the waterline and began calling out for Abbey to come back. But Abbey continued to awkwardly paddle further and further away. In the weak light and with all the space between us, I couldn't get a clear look at my student. But something was terribly wrong. Her strokes were uneven, erratic, but still unnaturally quick. Her legs never breaking the surface. She looked swollen, slightly crooked. I chalked it up to her clothing being waterlogged, though. If that was the cause of the distortion, how could she possibly keep swimming so quickly with all that weight? I slipped on something as we reached the shoreline. It was another puddle of tiny, dying millipedes and vomit. The fall sent me sprawling toward the water. I managed to catch myself, palm smacking into the tiled ground, but my left arm ended up in the fountain, soaking my jacket up to the elbow. The cold made me gasp. The water wasn't just chilly, it was freezing, like a lake right before a winter icing. That close, I could also detect a faint, foul odor coming off the water, and it was slightly oily. Carter helped me stand up, and I furiously shook my arm, trying to get the liquid off. Jessie was still shouting, trying to get Abbey's attention. Tyler had already kicked off his shoes and was in the process of pulling off his jacket when I stopped him. "I can get her," Tyler said, eyes anxious but determined. "I'm a good swimmer. I do beach patrol every summer. I can bring her back." I looked out again for Abbey. She was closer to 75 yards away from the shore now, and still moving in her strange yet quick paddle. "Tyler, it's too cold," I said, "and there's something wrong with the water." My hand that had plunged into the fountain was already turning red and beginning to itch. Tyler glanced at my hand, then over my shoulder to clock Abbey's progress. "Mr. Monroe, I can get her," he half promised, half pleaded. "Please, let me try." I was tempted. God forgive me, but I was tempted. I was a decent swimmer, but doubted I could catch up to Abbey even in good water. I didn't doubt Tyler was fitter and faster, but it was too cold and Abbey was too far. Not to mention, with how much a brief immersion had irritated my skin, letting Tyler attempt a rescue swim would likely end up with him blind, sick, or both. I shook my head. "I believe you would do everything you could. But, Tyler, the cold would drain you before you got anywhere near Abbey. And look how fast she's moving, even with her coat on. Something's not right." "Then we can't waste any more time," Tyler shouted, stepping into the shallows. I saw the cold hit him just as it had me. He nearly slipped, but caught himself and took another step. I grabbed his arm and spun him back toward the shore. For a moment, he looked like he was going to punch me. "Stop," a small voice begged. "Tyler, please. Mr. Monroe's right. Don't go." Jessie was standing at the edge of the water. She'd kicked off her shoes and taken off her jacket. "If you go out there, I know you won't come back," Jessie said. "But if you go, I'm going too." Tyler looked back and forth between Jessie and I, then over at Carter. "Too far out there," Carter said, shaking his head. Tyler sighed, stepping back onto shore. Abbey was barely a smudge against the gray water, disappearing as we watched. "Why?" Tyler asked, sitting down hard on the tile. Jessie knelt down next to him. "She was already in the water when I woke up. I think I saw her drinking from the fountain while I was still half asleep, unless I dreamed it, which is possible. But I think I did see her drink, and then wade out, and then I was fully awake, and you were here for the rest." "But why?" Tyler repeated. "She's sick," Carter gasped. "She was swelling up while everyone was sleeping, but she didn't seem to be in pain, so I didn't wake her up. I'm sorry. I should have said something." "It's not your fault," I told Carter. "It's this place. This fucking place. It hates us," Jessie added. "The mall. I think it hates us." I couldn't disagree. Far out across the cold, weird water, Abbey finally disappeared. None of us slept anymore after that. Jessie insisted that we wait by the shore for at least half an hour to see if there was any new sign of Abbey, but it soon became obvious she wasn't coming back. Eventually, there was nothing left for us to do except keep moving. So, we followed the tiled coastline, hoping without conviction that it might lead to an exit. After a few hours of walking, the scenery around us did begin to change, but not for the better. The artificial shore receded and then fell away, so that we were once again surrounded by open, empty shops and endless gray corridors. Whispers from the stores came louder and louder as we walked. The shadows called out to us, and despite our best efforts to stay in a tight cluster, we would inevitably drift apart. Some lagging, some leading, until I snapped out of the mall's mental fog and gathered the rocky horrors close again. There was a brief, bright moment where we exited a long stretch of gibbering storefronts and found ourselves in a wide-open part of the promenade. In the middle was a fountain, but it was normal size, not an indoor ocean. The potted plants along the edges of the space actually showed some green. And, best of all, no shadowy stores trying to lure us inside. We plopped down on a pair of nearby benches and took the opportunity to breathe. Tyler and Jesse both went looking for private places to relieve themselves, though I made them promise to stay within shouting distance. I nearly fell asleep, as tired as I was, and only Carter's stream of questions about my opinion on the Hellraiser franchise kept my eyes from locking shut. I admired his passion for movies, even in the face of the bland nightmare of them all, though I thought his ranking of Hellraiser Judgment above the original was ridiculous. I heard the creature before I saw it. There was a tremendous crashing and rumbling echoing from the corridor behind us, undercut by a booming tap tap tap, like pickaxes striking stone. I barely had enough time to drag Carter and I behind the low fountain wall before the monster burst into the plaza. "No," Carter moaned. I quickly covered his mouth to quiet him, but I had to bite down on my own lip to keep myself from screaming. The thing was massive, a sharp, swollen tube the size of a school bus, with too many legs to count. Pincers like industrial shears snapped open and closed under two twitching, jagged antennae. But by far the most horrible features of the giant were the ones that were still human. Still Abbey. Her face, most of her torso, and one arm jutted out of the millipede's trunk like some malignant figurehead. Abby's mouth was open in a frozen scream, though the only sound that came out was a chirping jumble. One of her eyes was missing, a ruined socket, but the other one? I prayed it was a trick of the light, but that eye seemed to dart around the plaza, awake, aware, and agonized. I looked for Jesse and Tyler and found them crouched together behind a large planter. There was 40 feet of open promenade between us. Jesse was shivering, her eyes jammed shut. I guessed she'd gotten a clear look at her friend and went into shock. Tyler had an arm wrapped protectively around her. He peered at the gibbering abomination through the planter's scrawny shrub, then looked over to me. The thing that used to be Abbey was staggering, unsteady on its multitude of legs, but growing closer to our hiding spots. It seemed to sniff or taste the air, and the chirping turned into a gravelly screech, its antenna waving frantically. It knows we're here somewhere, I thought, my blood going colder than the fountain water. I held my breath as it skittered over, praying that it would turn around and disappear back into whatever nightmare it crawled out of. But the millipede was becoming more focused, like it finally caught a trail. It began moving toward the fountain where Carter and I were hiding. Frantically, I searched for an escape or weapon. There was nothing nearby that would help me against an elephant-sized millipede, but I did notice a stairwell door on our side of the plaza. I gripped Carter's jacket. We would have to make a run for the door and hope it was unlocked. The thing that used to be Abbey was taking an indirect route toward us, and would dash forward at some scent just to stumble back several steps as if confused. Even with its instability, when the creature did want to move fast, it was very fast. I realized with a sinking certainty that we wouldn't be quick enough to reach the stairwell, especially since Carter was nearly hyperventilating already. The situation deteriorated further when the creature moved between us and the door. I pulled Carter along the fountain wall as far as I dared, knowing it might spot us at any moment. Carter was borderline catatonic, and I knew he wouldn't be able to move without help. It struck me that the only chance the kids had would be if I could draw Abbey away. I tried to swallow, but my throat wasn't cooperating. There was a terrible risk with how close the creature was that the moment I stood up, it would be on us. Even if I managed a few steps deeper into the plaza, Carter would be defenseless. But I couldn't see any other options. I snuck a look over at Jessie and Tyler. She still had her eyes closed, but he was watching me. "Door," I mouthed, nodding toward the stairwell. "Take Jessie and Carter. Be fast. Get ready." It wasn't much of a plan, but I was struggling to think of anything better with a supersized millipede clattering toward me. Tyler understood what I was going to attempt, and also realized it was a doomed effort. The creature was almost on top of Carter and I already. Tyler lifted Jessie's face up gently until she opened her eyes. He smiled and kissed her. Not on the lips, but on the forehead. He took her by the shoulders and, just as gently as he'd moved her face, he pointed her toward the fountain and whispered something in her ear. I thought he was getting her ready for the dash they'd both need to make as soon as I had the monster's attention. I prayed to whoever might be listening that I could get far enough to give them a chance. The abomination was agitated, its jaws snapping, so close that I could hear a barely audible noise coming from what was left of Abbey. It sounded like sobbing. I tensed, my body coiling like a sprinter anticipating the gun. I'd have to run across the fountain wall and head back the way we'd entered the plaza to have any hope of keeping Carter hidden. Though, if the creature followed me directly, it would nearly stumble over the frozen boy. I took one last look at Tyler and Jessie to make sure they were ready. Tyler caught my eye. He winked. "See you around, Keith," he mouthed. By the time his words registered, Tyler was running deeper into the plaza, shouting at the top of his lungs. "No," I whispered, standing up, but the creature was already past the fountain and didn't notice me. "Abbey, I'm sorry," he yelled in a loud, sing-song voice. "Abbey, please follow me. Abbey, Abbey, Abbey." Tyler was fast. I knew he played sports, but didn't realize until that moment that he must have been exceptional as an athlete. He took a straight route down the promenade, hurdling a bench without breaking his stride. It was like watching lightning, if you laced it into a pair of high-top Converses. And it wasn't nearly fast enough. Jessie began moving the moment the millipede's attention was on Tyler. She reached the fountain at the same time that the millipede crashed into Tyler. Someone screamed, though whether it was Tyler, Abbey, or one of us at the fountain, I'm not sure. Jessie helped me pull Carter, who was too shell-shocked to do more than stumble, toward the stairwell. In the only spot of luck we'd had since entering the godforsaken mall, the door was unlocked. I pushed the kids inside and turned to see if there was anything I could do for Tyler, or any chance he might slip past the creature and make a break for the stairs. He'd gotten a lot of distance with his run, but they were still close enough that I saw the pincers come down clearly around Tyler's stomach. I saw them snap shut. I saw... The stairwell door closed quickly behind me, cutting off a scream that I knew without a doubt was Tyler's. Jessie tried to push past me. "We have to go back," she sobbed. "We have to help him." "We can't," I said softly. "We can't help him." "Let me go," Jessie screamed. It took all of my strength to keep her from the door. It was like holding on to a tiny hurricane. "Jessie, stop. Stop, please. Tyler wouldn't want you to waste what he did by going back out there. Something in her collapsed, and she was suddenly dead weight in my arms. I sat her down on the floor next to Carter. Jessie? I hate you, she whispered, not looking at me. Why did you bring us here? Why? We're all gonna die. I stepped back and tried to speak, but couldn't find anything to say. The stairwell was darker than the rest of the mall. Not quite blacked out, but with only dim security lights embedded in the wall, a few per floor. The narrow stairs stretched into the shadows above us. I wanted to keep us moving, to start climbing in case the creature tried to get through the door despite its bulk. But I was empty. There just wasn't anything left. All I could do was lean against the wall while Carter buried his face between his knees and Jessie wept. I'm sorry, Mr. Monroe. I blinked and looked over at Jessie. My back was against the stairwell door, just in case anything tried to get in while we were regrouping. I hadn't fallen asleep, but I had slipped into a kind of mindless daze, probably as a form of self-defense. Even in that state, I heard Tyler's last scream echoing in my head over and over and over. Carter was still hugging his knees, but Jessie was alert if red-eyed. What? I asked her, trying to shake off the cobwebs. She roughly wiped tears from her cheek with her palm. I said, I was sorry. Sorry for blaming you. It's not your fault. Sure it is, I said, unable to keep the self-loathing from my voice. No, it isn't, Carter said, finally looking up. How could anyone know this was going to happen? If anything, it's my fault. I wish I'd never made that stupid fucking presentation to the club. Please stop, Jessie said, standing up. Let's all stop. We can all feel guilty later, if we make it out alive. We will, I said. Fuck this evil mall. We're not letting it win. Fuck the mall, Jessie agreed. Yeah, fuck it, Carter whispered, then looked up at the stairs stretching above us, as if he was worried the center would take the insults personally and respond. For all I knew, it might, but there was no use dwelling on it. What next? Jessie asked. I considered opening the door a sliver to see if the creature was still in the plaza, but I realized it didn't matter either way. We'd wasted hours wandering around the promenade of the mall. It was time to try something different. We climb, I said. We climb until we hit the roof or run out of stairs. This place isn't endless. It can't be. And I reckon there's a lot less of the mall above us than around us. The floors weren't marked, and I stopped counting them after the first 50. The stairs were narrow and deceptively uneven, with no rhyme or reason to the size of the steps. It was a grueling climb that we had to take slowly and carefully, or else risk a knee-cracking trip. The security lighting struggled against the shadows, leaving us unable to see more than 2 or 3 floors before everything went pitch black. It felt like we were chasing the darkness above us, while simultaneously being chased by the darkness below. The only safety, our fragile pocket of light. Can we take a break? Carter asked, leaning against the wall. We were resting every 10 floors already, but only for a few minutes at a time. The climb was taking a toll on all of us, and Carter was beginning to lag behind. I don't think we should stop, Jessie said, glancing down nervously. It's getting darker. I looked over the edge of the railing. The floor below us was dim, but otherwise clear. The next set of stairs down from that was murky, with long shadows laying across the steps like black rugs. I couldn't see the floor below that at all. Only a solid floor of darkness. "Are you sure it's getting darker?" I asked. "It's been pretty gloomy this whole time." Jessie chewed on her lip. "I shouldn't have said darker. What I meant was closer. Like the shadows are coming up faster." Carter, breathing heavily, looked over the railing and winced. "I'll be okay. Let's keep going. Take one more minute to catch your breath," I told him. "Mr. Monroe, I'm..." "1 minute," I insisted, still staring down into the shadows. "I'll keep watch." Jessie looked like she was going to protest for a second, but then took another look at Carter and nodded. She leaned against the wall next to an air vent. I noticed there was a large vent on every floor of the stairwell, each about the size of an oven door. As far as I could tell, they were perfectly normal, blowing cool air out into the cramped space. But nothing about them all was trustworthy. "Jessie, keep an eye on that," I said, pointing at the vent. She immediately slid away from it and began watching the dull metal grate carefully. I watched the shadows below us while everyone caught their breath, silently counting to 60. By the time I hit 45, I was sure of it. The darkness was creeping up toward us. It was slow, maybe an inch or two every 10 seconds, but it was undeniably moving. I didn't say anything to the kids, but I think Jessie read the fear on my face. "Let's keep moving," I said, helping Carter stand up. The shadows were rising faster. We kept to our pattern of climbing 10 floors, then taking a rest. But those breaks became shorter and shorter as the blackness below us started catching up. The dark wasn't quite as quick as us, but it didn't need to rest. And while we were getting tired and slowing down, it seemed to be building up speed. After another 30 floors, Carter was wheezing, and I was bending over to gulp air every time we stopped. Even Jessie, fit from years of cadet training at the fire department, was breathing heavily. "It's gonna catch us," Carter gasped, staring down into the darkness. "Don't look," I said. "Keep climbing." He was right, though. I knew we had to try something different and soon, because racing the shadows wasn't going to work. I was still brainstorming our options when we found the first missing steps. There was a small gap in the stairs, just 2 steps wide, but it meant there was a pit we would have to cross, and a slip meant a 1-story fall into the shadows. "You gotta be kidding me," Carter wheezed. "Who the fuck is responsible for the maintenance around here?" I was able to step across the gap, and then help Jessie and Carter cross. The optimistic part of me hoped that this was a strange one-off issue, and that the rest of the stairs would be whole. But the center mall had done a great job of murdering any optimism I had left. So when we encountered another, wider gap on the next floor, I didn't feel any surprise. Only a dull, nauseating despair. There wasn't a hole on every floor, but most of them were missing at least a few steps. The issue grew worse as we climbed, until the stairwell eventually had more gaps than stairs. Most of the pits could be walked across, albeit with some stretching, but every now and then, we'd have to jump. Despite being the smallest of us, Jessie had no issues springing over the missing steps. Carter, however, hesitated longer and longer each time. He would stare down at the darkness below until I managed to coax him into jumping toward my outstretched hand. Each time I helped him across, I noticed how badly he was trembling. The shadows were closing in from all sides, and I couldn't see above us at all. But I knew the gaps were only going to get larger if we kept climbing. I had a plan to get out of the stairwell, though I was worried it would take us out of the frying pan and into the fire. There weren't any better options that I could see, though. So, after leaping over a large section of missing steps that brought us to the next landing, I caught Jessie and pointed at the nearby air vent. "Check to see if that will come off," I told her. Jessie blanched. "We can't go in there." "I think we have to. It's too small." "We'll fit, I guess. And we can't keep climbing, not with the gaps getting wider. Maybe the stairs get better above us." I glanced up at the black ceiling looming over us. "Do you really believe that?" Jessie shook her head and reluctantly moved to check the vent. While she and I were talking, Carter was psyching himself up to make the jump. It was the longest leap so far, and I could tell he was exhausted and terrified. "You can make it, Carter," I promised him. "I'll catch you." "Mr. Monroe, I don't think I can." The shadows were practically licking at his heels by that point. Up close, the darkness looked nearly solid and greasy like black water. "You have to. You'll make it, Carter. And this is the last jump." I prayed I was right about that last part. If Jessie couldn't get the grate off the vent, or if it was blocked, we'd have no choice but to stay in the stairwell. "Mr. Monroe, I got it," Jessie called out from the landing. "Great job," I shouted back, but my eyes never left Carter. I watched him take a deep breath, let it out slowly, and then he jumped. Or he tried to jump. At the last moment before his feet left the steps, the shadows caught up to him, slipping under and around his ankles. Carter's leap turned into a stumble, his eyes wide with panic as he tripped. Even with the stumble, he managed to push off the top step and gain some distance, but I saw immediately it wouldn't be enough to bridge the gap. I was already leaning forward with one arm outstretched and the other locked on the handrail. On reflex, when Carter slipped, I let go of the railing and dropped down, slamming painfully into the hard stairs. Carter's half-trip, half-jump carried him almost to the other side of the gap. He fell just shy, screaming and grasping for the step. I caught him by the wrist, his weight nearly jerking both of us over the ledge. Somehow, I managed to sprawl and hook a leg into the railing. I was going to be covered in bruises, and both of my shoulders were on fire. But I had a good grip. "Holy shit," Carter gasped. "Holy shit, you caught me. Hell yes, Mr. Monroe. Hell yeah." Before he could finish, the darkness around Carter surged up and wrapped around his legs. There was a tremendous tug, and Carter was ripped out of my hands. He didn't have time to scream before the shadows swallowed him. I laid face down on the steps for a moment, stunned. That's when Carter began to scream. It didn't sound like a faraway falling scream. The sound was close, raw, and horrible. It was a senseless, burbling shriek. I crawled to my knees and, feeling pushed past my breaking point, began to shout down into the dark. "Give him back. I had him. I had him. Give him back." Jessie was pulling on my jacket, begging me to move. The shadows were still climbing up the stairs and nearly on us. "Please," she said, Please, I can't go alone. Please, Mr. Monroe, please. I allowed her to lead me to the air vent. Every part of me ached. I wasn't scared. I didn't feel anything at all. It was like I was watching my body from a distance as I climbed into the cramped ventilation duct behind Jessie. Carter's screams followed us for a long time as we crawled through the metal vents. At any moment, I expected the shadows from the stairwell to spill into the air ducts, to drown us in darkness. And part of me almost wanted that, because at least the nightmare would be over. But the shadows never came. In fact, the vents were brighter than they should have been, with no obvious signs of lighting. A kind of oily, gray luminescence seemed to leak from the metal walls, giving us enough light to navigate the narrow tunnel. Not that there was much navigation necessary. The vent stretched on in a long, straight shot, only high enough for us to crawl through on our hands and knees. Jessie led the way, and I shuffled along behind her, dutifully stopping when she suggested we rest, but barely hearing her. After some time, we came upon a sort of crossroads where two vents intersected. The place where they met was wide enough that we could sit down and face each other, though still too low to stand up. Mr. Monroe? Mr. Monroe, can you look at me? I lifted my eyes from where they were staring at the floor to Jessie's face. Her eyes were red and tears streaked her cheeks, but her expression was calm and determined. I need you to be here, Mr. Monroe. I'm here. No, you're not. I'm not sure where you are, but it's not here. I'm so scared, Jessie said, her voice breaking. And I don't want to die. But if I am going to die, please don't make me die alone. The cold, hollow tension that had held me since Carter's fall loosened. You're not alone, I told her. Yes, I am, she snapped. Then she took a deep breath. I don't blame you. I don't blame you for checking out, and I don't blame you for any of this. I'm sorry I ever said that. I don't blame you, but I do need you. Please, don't just give up. Jessie pawed tears out of her eyes. I scooted forward and wrapped her in a hug. She hugged me back fiercely, then started sobbing on my shoulder. I'm here, I whispered. I'm sorry. I'm here now. It's okay. I'm here. She held on to me for a few minutes, then pulled away with a loud sniffle. Thank you, Jessie said. No, Jessie. Thank you. We're gonna get out of this. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, we're not. It's not gonna let us out. I shook my head. We don't know. Yes, we do, Jessie said. But it's okay. Even if it gets us, we'll make this piece of shit mall work for it. I wanted to tell her that she was wrong, and that we would get out of the center mall. That everything would be okay. But that was a promise I'd been making and breaking since we'd stepped out of the Claires and into hell. It won't get us easy, I said instead. I hope you choke on us, I shouted, the words echoing in the vents. Jessie chuckled, then grew somber. This will be tough on my family, she said after a moment. Especially my mom. We were supposed to go to Spain over break. We were all looking forward to it. I'm gonna miss... Jessie began sobbing. Sorry, she said between tears. I'm sorry I'm so scared. I'm useless. No, I told her. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met. I'm proud of you. All of you. My Rocky horrors. It was my turn to get choked up. Jessie snorted. I don't feel brave. Never felt brave. Everything scared me. Even before we came here. She looked up. Tyler asked me on a date last month. I said no. Not because I didn't want to go, but I was scared he was messing with me. Do you think he was messing with me? No, Jessie. I don't think he was messing with you. I don't either. He was crazy, running out like that. Wasn't he? Crazy as a lion, I said. Fast, too. Yeah, Jessie agreed. Only thing faster than his feet was his mouth. She laughed, but the laugh fell off into a sob. I squeezed her shoulder, but couldn't think of anything to say other than, let's keep moving. Later, though I don't know how much later, I stopped for a moment to stretch. My head banged into the ceiling with a metallic ding. It didn't hurt, but I felt a chill lick my spine. It wasn't the first time I'd done the exact same stretch, but it was the first time I'd bumped my head. Jessie turned around and looked back at me. Seeing my expression, she gave a tight nod of understanding. The vents are closing in, she said, looking back over her shoulder. It's getting tighter. Fucking course it is, I thought grimly. Maybe we should change spots, Jessie suggested. You should go first since you're bigger. If it gets too tight and you get stuck, I might be able to pull you back. I shook my head. The smaller explorer goes first in caving. Because if I get well and truly stuck, that would trap both of us. If you get stuck, I'm not going any further anyway, Jessie said. Yeah, you are, I insisted. Remember, we're not going easy. If I get trapped, you keep crawling. Maybe the mall gets you, but maybe, just maybe, you beat it. This hell can't go on forever. I think it could, if the mall wants it to, Jessie said. She shrugged. But, okay, I promise. I won't go easy. The vents continued to narrow until we had no choice but to crawl forward on our bellies. At any moment, I expected to feel a squeezing pressure and a sudden, terrible halt. But the ducts never quite got that tight. And then, suddenly, there was the groan of metal and Jessie stopped moving. I'm stuck, she yelled back. Fuck. Well, there it is. We'll have to backtrack, I thought. Hold tight. I'll pull you back, I said. I'm not going anywhere, she promised. There was another groan. I saw the ducts in front of me shiver and contract. It's getting tighter, Jessie shouted, voice steady, but with panic at the edges. I grabbed her ankles and braced myself as best as I could against the vent walls, and hauled her back with all of my strength. Jessie didn't budge. Another groan, and this time, she screamed. It hurts, she shouted, her voice muted by the duct pressing in all around her. I'm having a hard time breathing. I pulled again, so hard I was shaking, but Jessie was frozen. Help, please help, I can't breathe, she screamed, her legs, the only part of her visible now, thrashing. "Hold on, I'll get you out." I tugged again and again, but all I managed to do was dislodge one of her boots. "Please," Jessie whimpered, her voice sounding far away. "It's getting tighter. Oh God, oh my God, I don't want to die. I don't want to die like this." It took Jessie a long time to die. After those initial groans where the walls closed in around her, the vents stopped moving, leaving her unable to escape, barely able to breathe, but not quite killing her outright. She went through periods of panic, followed by brief moments of calm. We talked for a little while, though I can't remember what we talked about. Jessie had such a hard time breathing that it was mostly a one-sided conversation, and then entirely a one-sided conversation when she stopped responding. Every now and then, her legs would kick and scramble, but she never managed to shift her position. After maybe an hour, Jessie stopped moving completely. The only sign of life was a weak pulse I found at her ankle. I kept talking to her the whole time. I tried to comfort her at first. Then, when I ran out of things to say, I talked about the movies and books I planned on covering in club meetings that year. When I couldn't think of anything else on that topic, I just rambled, patting her leg every few minutes, feeling helpless, hopeless. At some point, I couldn't find a pulse, even a weak one. I didn't move for a long time, my face pressed against the cold metal duct. Then I started screaming, "Fucking kill me then! Kill me! Kill me!" The words echoed back at me, bouncing off the walls of the vent, like the mall was mocking me. "Please," I begged. "No more." There was no answer and no way forward. Eventually, with nothing else to do, I began wiggling backward. Even after I was clear of the tightest part of the passage, there was no room for me to turn around. So I kept crawling back until I reached the crossroads. There, finally, I had enough space to rotate so I could face forward. I knew the vent I was in terminated at the stairwell on one end, and Jessie's body at the other. So I chose the left corner of the intersection at random. I didn't expect it to lead anywhere. The most likely outcome was that I would crawl until the mall decided to finally crush me like it had Jessie. Or maybe the bottom of the vent would open and I'd fall like Carter. Or the shadows would take me, or the bugs. There was a cold comfort in realizing that, however the mall decided to kill me, however slow and painful that death might be, at some point, I would be dead. It would all be over. I'd be free. The vent ended only a few minutes after I'd entered it. There was a grate which popped out easily, leading to a small drop. And then I was standing in the main area of the mall again. I stretched, my back popping like bubble wrap, and looked around. No monstrous insects hung from the ceiling. There was a corkboard on a nearby wall, next to an empty security station. The board was overflowing with missing person posters. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. I saw one for each of my students. My hands shook for a moment, but I pushed any feelings away. I was done letting them all fuck with me. There were stores all around me, but they were closed, locked behind metal security shutters. The light was the same as it always was, gray and watery, except ahead of me on the promenade, I saw a bright glow spilling out of one of the storefronts. I took a deep breath and began to walk toward the light, sure that the mall had some fresh hell planned for me, but finally, truly beyond caring, my students were all dead. I could not save them, and despite whatever they said, I knew it was my fault that we were all here. I deserved to die. I wanted to die. I think that's why the Center Mall decided not to kill me. There was a sign above the well-lit store. Claire's. I stared at it for a long time before looking into the store itself. The space was small and identical to where the whole horrible journey began. There were 5 figures spread out amongst the aisles. Their faces were blank, their bodies unmoving, but their clothes were familiar, right down to the one missing a boot. I walked into the Claire's and up to each mannequin. When I reached the one that looked like Jessie, I realized I was crying. "I'm going to burn this place to the ground if you don't kill me," I promised softly. The mannequins didn't respond. The mall didn't respond. Maybe it knew my promises weren't worth much. I looked up when I heard a noise from outside the Claire's. It was the ding of an elevator opening. Feeling drawn to the sound, I stepped out of the store and immediately winced, squinting my eyes against the harsh light. Not harsh. Normal. Everything around me looked normal. Winter sunlight, strained but lovely, fell through the skylights above me. People milled about the promenade with shopping bags and orange Julius cups, chatting and laughing, though all of them seemed to hurry past the Claire's without looking at it when they passed by. The huge pots along the walkway were green with healthy plants. Somewhere under me, I realized I was on the second floor. I heard a fountain bubbling. The elevator dinged again, and I shuffled toward the sound like a sleepwalker. A family spilled out when the doors opened, the 2 young kids laughing, the parents snacking on a shared cup of soft pretzel bites. The food smelled amazing. The family stopped and looked at me when I began to weep. Then they hurried away. I climbed into the elevator and hit the button for the first floor. The entire trip down, I waited for the trap to spring. I knew this last trick had to be the Center Mall breaking my mind before it killed my body. Any moment, the walls of the elevator would close in, or it would suddenly drop down the shaft like a brick down a wishing well. Or maybe the doors would open and the Abbey thing would be there waiting. The doors did open, but there were no monsters on the other side. Just the mall, complete with shoppers and sunlight and the faint, pleasant scent of the nearby food court. I almost shrieked when the glass exit door didn't open, but I realized that I was pulling instead of pushing. When I did it correctly, the door swung open and I stumbled out into a fading winter sunset. I shivered. It seemed like no time at all had passed between the Rocky Horror Club entering the Claire's and me exiting alone. Our van was right where I'd parked it. I stood staring at it for a long time, glancing back over my shoulder at the mall every now and then, certain that any moment now, it would get tired of playing with me and spring the trap. Nothing happened when I climbed into the van, Nothing happened when I started it. And nothing happened when I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the highway. I was in a daze, just going through the motions. It dawned on me after about 5 minutes of driving that I might actually be free of the mall. A second, crueler realization followed. If any of the kids were still alive, as unlikely as that might be, I was abandoning them. I searched the side of the highway for the nearest exit, picking up speed. I had to go back. I had to look for them. I decided that I would call 911 on the return drive, though I had no idea what I would say. Seeing an exit approaching, I glanced in my rearview mirror to make sure it was safe to merge over. That's when I saw that I had passengers. 5 mannequins, each dressed like a Rocky Horror, were sitting in the back of the van. I think I screamed. I know I slammed on the brakes and twisted the wheel toward the shoulder of the road, desperate to get out of the vehicle. That much I'm sure of, though the next part is hazy. I remember a horn and a glimpse of a big blue pickup truck barreling toward me. My swerve left the van horizontal across the next lane. The truck T-boned me, and then the floor switched places with the ceiling. I don't remember anything after that, until I woke up in the hospital 2 days ago. The doctors told me I was very lucky, that a few broken bones and one collapsed lung aren't fun, but they're far better than it could have been. They also tell me that I'm lucky I was the only one in the van when it flipped, though they had a lot of questions about why I'd left my students in the mall. I begged them to send the police and paramedics, or even the army, into the center to search for the kids. But all I got in return were baffled looks and more pain medication. I was left to sleep and heal and dread the moment that I'd have to face my students' families. A nurse was kind enough to leave me a journal, and I've spent every waking moment trying to organize my thoughts about what happened in the center mall. Every time someone steps in my room, I ask if there's been any sign of the club. The pain meds make me fuzzy, but the smiles they always give me make me far more confused. Why weren't they concerned about the missing students, or horrified by the bodies if those had been found? I got my answer this morning when a cheerful nurse led 5 visitors into my room. They couldn't stay long, the nurse explained, because I needed my rest, but the doctors felt it would do me good to see that everyone was okay. The things pretending to be the Rocky Horrors grinned and tried to chat with me about when we'd have our next club meeting, what movies they should watch. The nurse, noticing my look of absolute terror, hurriedly rushed the kids out of the room, giving me another blast of medication on the way. I wanted to scream, but the opioids made me sink into the hospital bed until it felt like I was trapped inside a cloud. How could the doctors not see the blankness behind the Rockies' eyes? The smoothness of their fingertips? The flat, plaster smell of them? Alright, everybody. That's it for the Dying Mall series. I hope you all enjoyed this new series by Travis Brown, specifically written for this channel, which I really appreciate him doing. If you enjoyed the series, I hope you'll leave a like, comment, subscribe, hype the video if you can. All those things really help out a lot. And let me know in the comments if you want to see more longer videos like this one. I really enjoy doing these longer 2 to 3 hour series, and even longer than that if possible. So if you enjoy these longer stories, please let me know in the comments, and I'll try to do more of them. I hope you all will support Travis Brown, the author. I'll link all of his information in the description below. He's got a couple books out, a new website, so I hope you all will check that out and give some support to the author. Thanks everybody for watching, and hope you have a great night.
Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGrupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.